This is the time to stand up now. We can't carry on like this. This is the time to stand up now. We can't carry on like this. This is the time to stand up now. We can't carry on like this. This is the time to stand up now. We can't carry on like this. This is the time to stand up now. We can't carry on like this. This is the time to stand up now. We can't carry on like this.
Truth is, I've been receiving threats to my life from pretty much the moment I started this journey. And unfortunately, what these predominantly Pakistani paedophiles, pimps and drug pushers don't understand is this isn't Pakistan. It doesn't matter that you have politicians in your pocket. It doesn't matter that you have bent police officers protecting you. This still isn't Pakistan, and we will object. We will scream defiance to the grooming and gang rape and the corruption that infests this town.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011, he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.
Very warm welcome to the rabble. Easter Sunday, my warmest wishes to my Christian friends and to all others who take this time to rest and be with friends and family and eat chocolate. It seems commercialism has got to Easter in the same way it has got to Christmas. I struggle with that, really, if I'm honest with you. But to my Christian friends, a very, very warm welcome for Easter. We have so many with you today, so many with me today. I was in two minds, actually, of whether to do something today. I've been off all week. I've been actually hiding all week, if I'm honest. I've been away from my house and for most of the week. And thank you to Moyeb and the Gisari Road guys who've been feeding me throughout the week. It's been a challenging week for me. What I put up earlier is pretty much how it's been for the last 2 years. Unfortunately, I can deal with gangsters, I can deal with paedophiles and pimps and heroin dealers, but unfortunately, what took place over the last week or so was the clear crossing of a line where a corrupt police officer, Detective Inspector Kenny Blaine of Greater Manchester Police, based out of Oldham Police Station, along with the disgraced journalist and malicious blogger as described by a High Court judge, Neil Wilby, in partnership with Jim McMahon MP, Sean Fielding, leader of the council, and a number of others, ended up putting on social media an image of my front door with a chilling message underneath. Of course, I reported it to the police, but unfortunately, I do not enjoy the special protection that Sean Fielding's girlfriend enjoys. The police have not as so much as responded to my reporting of the crime regarding Mr. Rusty Wheels, who I know who he is, by the way. I've not shared the information because I do not want to in any way engage in any form of vigilante type justice. But unfortunately, I understand why people do go out and take the law into their own hands when Greater Manchester Police, a police force in special measures, deemed to be not at all fit for purpose, finds itself in a position where it does. So I understand why people take the law into their own hands. I, of course, will not be, because I am a law-abiding citizen and I will endeavour to do my best. I have also reported Detective Inspector Kenny Blaine for what I believe to be corruption to the police complaints a lot. And again, predictably, I've not heard back. Although, interestingly, I have heard back from Sir Keir Starmer. So, Jim McMahon, Sean Fielding, Sir Keir Starmer's been back in touch with me. And I'll share some of that later. So, before we go on, I am only able to do what I do here with your support. There's a Buy Me a Coffee link. My ask to people is, and I'm grateful to so many of you who donated last week and the week before, particularly towards security measures in my house, which I've now bought, is I would rather more people who engage in this just donate a couple of pounds on the Buy Me a Coffee site every time you watch, if you think what I'm providing is of value. And I'm embarrassed actually by some of you who donate so much. I'm genuinely embarrassed, so please, I'd like more people to donate, but fewer, with fewer amounts is really what I'd like, because I'd like to I understand the value I bring on this platform, and I understand the value I bring to the town, and I hope the town and the people of the town, and enough people of the town, feel I'm worth a couple of pounds a month. So that's where we're up to. It's buymeacoffee.com/recusant9. It's there at the bottom of the screen. And I would also ask, this comes up on YouTube. The only way this gets shared and pushed by the algorithms is you've got to subscribe to the channel. It's free. Just please click on the subscribe button and click on the like post if you like to think I add value to your weekend. And that's how this gets pushed, and that's how more and more people hear about it. And it's important that more and more people hear about this, because more and more people in the Labour Party and the cartels are desperately trying to shut me down. It's one of the reasons why I'm not broadcasting on Facebook, because I want to keep that Facebook platform running for as long as possible, because I know so many of you engage through Facebook. But at the same time, I know you get a lot of value from these Sunday night transmissions. So that's why the Sunday night transmissions are on YouTube. You've seen yourselves how they gloat. You've seen how they can't wait to censor what is essentially an Asian Muslim guy sharing his views and opinions on his hometown every week and on issues that matter to all of us. And this fake liberal metropolitan elite are desperate to shut me down, desperate to censor me. So much so that I'm repeatedly referred to as a racist, although this week we found out what a racist really was, what a far-right activist really was. It was a serving police officer. And whilst that serving police officer did get arrested, and he made the national news as to how a police officer managed to get through all of the checks and balances when he belonged to what is essentially a terrorist organisation, a neo-Nazi organisation. You know what happened in Oldham? Jim McMahon's associate, Irish Immy, convicted heroin dealer and getaway driver for Dale Cregan, who murdered 2 policewomen, 1 from Oldham. And I will never stop saying that, because I think it's really important. Do you know what he did? He took that to attack Debbie Cole and liken Debbie Cole to this far-right thug. This woman has had to flee for her life, and this gangster criminal is still harassing her. How does that make any of you feel? And the reason why he's still harassing her the way he is because Detective Inspector Kenny Blaine has given him free rein. And remember, this is a man with form. It's not just that he's spent most of his adult life in prison. He was convicted in December this year for his online harassment and incitement against me. And he's continuing to do this against a woman who has been threatened with kidnap and rape following Irish Immy sharing this view that Debbie Barrett Cole is some form of racist on 17 Islamic groups across the country. How far do these people want to go? How long before the Labour Party suspends Jim McMahon, who has an open relationship and endorses this gangster? How much more? Does someone have to die? Sorry, I'm just checking all of the messages. I've not paid much attention. So, yes, good evening to all of you. Nice to see so many of you give up your Easter Sundays to join me for this. I'm going to start with this, and today's just a conversation, by the way. I have genuinely been away from my house, so I've not prepared the slides, but I've got some themes, as I usually have. I've got a scrap of paper, and I can do what I do with a scrap of paper quite comfortably. The government released a race report, and if you've seen the race report, there was an outcry from the mainstream media. Columnist after columnist, academic after academic, politician after politician were lining up to criticize the government on the findings of this race report. And essentially what the findings was that structural racism no longer exists. Now, structural racism, for those who want a lesson, and I'll do it as simply as I can, is essentially that the system is stacked against you. The institutions that govern this country are stacked against you. And the notion of structural racism actually came from the phrase institutional racism, which is what emerged from the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. And of course, Stephen Lawrence's mother came out and repeated her, and I get it, her son died, and she'll never get over that, and I don't think anyone would. But we in Oldham know a different truth, don't we? There's a young white lad who was viciously murdered. And because of fear of being called racist, his murderers essentially got away. There was no media attention to Gavin's murder, was there? And if there was, it was minimal. They couldn't even share his picture for fear of the far right hijacking it. So this finger on structural racism, and all of them lining up one after another. The first thing I took from it was, of course the report is preposterous, but then so was the starting point of where this report came about from. Remember, the starting point of this report was this nonsense called white privilege, and this nonsense called unconscious bias that these people had been peddling for the last 4 or 5 years, at least. Unconscious bias means because I'm different to you, somehow I think less of you. I've had bias, I've got a negative opinion somewhere in the back of my mind, unconsciously. I'm prejudiced. And these morons have been pushing this nonsense, and it's gained traction. So when you come up with something as nonsensical as unconscious bias, and when you come up with this phrase, white privilege, and ram it down the throats of white people who've never had any form of privilege whatsoever, and actually, by every indicator out there, suffer at least as much as, if not more than, other minority ethnic groups, what do you think's going to come out at the other end? And I'm not a Tory. I've never been a Tory, so I've never agreed with many of their findings. And these guys, women, academics, politicians, and so much airtime. You know what I found really, really disturbing? Is how they all crawled out of the woodwork to attack a government report and a government department that only weeks earlier had come up with some nonsense that the grooming gangs didn't exist in the way we thought they existed, and lied about their own statistics, misrepresented their own statistics, when the statistics overwhelmingly showed that the Pakistani men were overrepresented in the grooming gangs. Not a single one of them had anything to say then, did they? No. It only suits when they can be the victims. And that's really the problem with racism in this country. It's been weaponized. It's been absolutely weaponized. And as long as it remains this way, none of us will ever move forward. But it suits them. It suits so many of them. because it means people like me are divided from people like you, which is why I was overjoyed to see images this week of Paul Boots-Eric putting up and Gary Tarbuck putting up of Gary from Proudham, Oldham and Saddleworth out in Coldhurst campaigning alongside Azad, the independent candidate there, who's up against the sex offender's friend, Councillor Abdul Jabbar. Now, what these people, Fielding, McMahon, Debbie Abrahams, would like to do is present us as a bunch of racists. And here we have Gary Tarbuck out campaigning alongside a group of Bangladeshis who want to oust a tyrant who's relied on postal votes, who's relied on the Labour Party actually suspending the branch, preventing the Labour Party's own members from picking their candidate, because McMahon knew that Abdul Jabbar would be kicked out by members of the Labour Party. So they suspended the branch. And here we have Gary Tarbuck from Proudham, Oldham and Saddleworth, whose grandfather lived in Coldhurst up in Trafalgar Street, out campaigning with the independents. And then I saw Paul Boots put a post up promoting Aftab Hussain in St. Mary's. So much for them being racist. So much for us being racist. Oh, I forgot. The racists, the real racists, the Labour Party got themselves in trouble in Warrington. They were racist against the gypsy and traveller community. Outright race-baiting racism in their election leaflets. They were going to deal with the gypsy problem, or words to that effect. We know who the racists are. Good evening, Debbie. I just shared with everyone what's the latest harassment against you. I find it appalling, Debbie. I find it appalling. Mark, the Labour Party has an issue with its Muslim members. Its Muslim members have come out and accused the Labour Party of racism, anti-Muslim bigotry. And it's because, and this is what McMahon's problem with me is, they want the ethnics to stay in their lane. They want them to do as they're told, eat the scraps off the floor beside the master's table. And unfortunately, every time an ethnic or a working class white person gets ideas above their station, they're given a slap. Because the Labour Party isn't a working class party, it's not an ethnic minority party, it's none of the things they present themselves as. It's essentially run by a fake liberal metropolitan elite who are fighting it out with the Tory toffs. And that's why, in a town like ours, I champion the independents. Because they want nothing to do with that game. Now, some of them may be weak. Some of them might be maybe inexperienced. But then I look at Sean Fielding and I think, is anyone weaker than him? Is anyone more inexperienced than him? Is anyone more of a buffoon than he is? No. So I support the independents. I support Aftab. I support Azad. I support Gary. I support all of them. He is, isn't he, Anita? He's a proud veteran. And he should be proud. Excellent, Debbie. You should be contacting your local police, Debbie, because I'm hoping your local police in Somerset aren't as... well, they're in special measures, aren't they? Here in Greater Manchester, I can call them what I want, because it's probably true. Their own inspectors have deemed them not fit for purpose. Thank you, Amanda. Subscribing and buying me a coffee. The subscription and the coffee, always welcome. It's been 2 years, give or take. It's been 2 years since we started this, and in the beginning it was just me and Moira. I don't know if he's on here today, but it was just me and Moira who started this, and you know, I've done it the way I have done it because I'm used to speaking to people. It's what I've done. I know I've had to learn how to use all of this camera stuff, but I'm used to speaking to people. I'm used to engaging with people and getting people to develop their perspectives and their views and opinions on a whole host of issues and see the world through a wider perspective through which they challenge themselves and challenge each other. Unfortunately, it seems in this town, such a perspective, such an attitude, such a skill set is dangerous. They'd rather have a drug dealer or a pimp. Sorry, that was my daughter messaging me, so I've just turned her off. Not messaging me, FaceTiming me. She does know I'm on this thing, but she has had chocolate all day. I went and did a Easter egg hunt with her in the garden earlier. So yeah, unfortunately. And how can it be? How can it be in a town like ours that the politicians openly celebrate their relationship with heroin dealers and gangsters and those who sexually assaulted young women or kidnapped and tortured young people? How can that be right? How can an MP remain silent to that? Or 2 MPs, 3 MPs. How can they all remain silent to that? Worse, how can they openly participate with people involved in that? How can they openly support people involved in kidnapping, sexually abusing, and torturing young people? I don't think any of us can, Debbie. I don't think any of us can. And I'm glad you're settling in Somerset, but it's a disgrace, Debbie. And the people of Oldham, the good people of Oldham, can see what the police have been up to. Or those that control the police have been up to. And I did laugh, Debbie. I know I've been away and off social media for a week or so, but I did see one of your posts when I got back where you'd put a picture up, where you'd put the photograph up of Detective Inspector Kenny Blaine. So I'm sure his colleagues at Oldham Police Station, the decent ones at least, are sniggering at him and what he's been up to and how he's been exposed. Okay. Next conversation, next theme. There's a school in London, it's called Pimlico School. And Pimlico School has made the news, and it's been presented in a spun out way. But essentially what's happened is a bunch of ultra-left teachers and some students are outraged at the new head teacher, because the new head teacher is insisting on things like school uniforms being worn and discipline and all the things that new head teachers always do. They come in and focus on the basics. And when the head teacher introduced a number of features in the school, the kids have gone on strike. And because it's posh London, and because it politically suits, it's made the national news. Not in outrage at what they've done, but in support of what they've done. And so there is no ambiguity. What these students, supported by a bunch of lefty professionals, they've ripped down the union flag that the head teacher introduced as being flown outside the school and burnt it. And when it got replaced, they've gone on strike. And the head teacher has been forced to take down the national flag. And the Black Lives Matters brigade have got involved and are chanting about we want our history taught. And their history, that their version of events they want to be taught is this thing around white privilege and unconscious bias. And for every working class white person, child, to feel as though they are the oppressor. Because that's what the Black Lives Matters decolonizing of the curriculum nonsense is all about. It's not about recognizing that whilst black people were oppressed, the white working class were having to send their children up chimneys and into factories when they were 5 or 6 years old. They were starving in workhouses. No, the white working class is the oppressor. Scumbags. And The Guardian and all the other newspapers, the BBC, are reporting this without any outrage as to the burning of the national flag. But how unreasonable the head teacher is and how these kids are protesting. And the issue we have in Oldham with that is the government's own statistics still show Oldham to be one of the most racially divided towns in the country. And the attempts made to integrate our education system have systematically failed and are continuing to fail. And the consequence of that is the appeasement, because that's what it is, the appeasement to the political left doesn't just stop at appeasement there. We just need to look at what's going on in Backley. That teacher now fears for his life. He was trying to teach blasphemy. He was suspended. It's now emerged 2 other teachers have been suspended because they were aware of what he was going to teach. The government minister has already come out and said he had every right to do what he did, which was teaching blasphemy. And is this blasphemy? And if it is blasphemy, why is it blasphemy and why isn't it? Because we want our young people to have some form of critical thinking. Don't we? Well, I do. No. This is appeasement. The burning of our flag. The telling us what we can and what we can't teach our children in schools. The bowing down to a bearded bunch of nutters outside the school. Line after line after line has been crossed. I have a friend of mine. I saw his post yesterday. I have a friend of mine, and it made me sad. My friend's name is Angur. Angur moved into number 32 Widdop Street when I was probably about 4 years old. He was actually one of my first Bangladeshi neighbours. My entire street where I grew up was almost exclusively white. And Angor moved in with his brother Almas and his mum and dad. And as he grew up, people called him Bruce Lee because he had a natural talent for the martial arts. Now, what he also is a very talented musician. And what these Islamists want to do is they won't stop at blasphemy and RE. They want to influence the curriculum in more ways. They want to ban music. They see music as un-Islamic. So they've been attacking poor Angor for a lifetime. And he still plays his flute. I think that's what he does in the men. He plays his flute and sings a bit. And he came out outraged against these Islamists who've been trying to ban music in the community and influence schools and youth centres to the banning of music and the banning of drama. And those of you who are familiar with what is going on in the communities where I grew up, there's a battle being fought between people like Angor, who are few and far between because most people are scared, and then the Islamists and the appeasers in the town hall and politicians like McMahon who are happy to go out and endorse these prejudices, reinforce these prejudices. Why else do you think McMahon sits in rooms with exclusively male participants? Yes, we know they control the postal votes. Oh, by the way, I'd run out of headspace actually, but the video for the first of the jihadi gyms, Samosa Guide, is now approaching 5,000 views. The next one will be on the cartels, which I think certain Labour Party politicians will also find as uncomfortable, if not more so. But yes, Amanda, they want to ban music. We already know that they want to ban any education around homosexuality. You've seen that in Birmingham, haven't you? Where they've been lining up and chanting and chanting. And again, appeasement there. The local MP, and I've shared this on one of my posts, is on record where he's met with some of these idiots and said, I agree with you. Well, I don't agree with them at all. I don't agree with them at all. I find it disgraceful. In fact, I find it disgusting. But in a liberal Western democracy such as ours, we're appeasing these people. It's the national flag. And they pulled it down and burnt it. And when it went back up, they went on strike. And the national flag has had to be removed from a school. You won't be surprised to know that Jim McMahon is a supporter of Black Lives Matter. He's held up a poster of Black Lives Matter as soon as the movement started, and Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner both took the knee. So none of that will surprise any of you. Ofsted, about 3 years ago at Clarksfield School, found that a council-run school had a gender policy where girls were treated inferior to boys. The investigation report into that school and other schools at the time, which were found to be fundraising for organisations, including those that many of us would consider to be terrorist organisations. That's right, fundraising in schools to organisations directly linked to terrorism. They won't release that report. On an FOI request, it's buried in there that this is, according to the council, never intended for public release. Why is that? Why is that? Where are we going? When are we going to say enough is enough? Hi there, Mab. You well? I noticed I've not had a phone call from Jakub lately at 6 in the morning, so I'm doing all right there. Maybe he's having a lie, you know, mate. Maybe you finally worked out to lock him out of your phone. So yeah. Paul, I was overjoyed to see you promoting Aftab, the Independent, in Glodick, and also Azad, Montaz Azad Ali, the Independent in Coldest. And also, I was so supportive of seeing so many of you, of you who listen in, who've been called racists when I know you're not, share and support this page and these candidates. Because we know the future of this town, if this town is to have a future, it has to be out of the hands of this corrupt council led by a corrupt bunch of politicians who all dance to Jim McMahon's tune. Because be in no doubt, the person in charge of this town is still Jim McMahon MP. So much is he in charge of this town. He announced, or his office announced last week, that they are moving. They are moving into Chadderton Town Hall. So the old town hall in Chadderton, they're moving into that. Now, the last time I went into Chadderton Town Hall was for a wedding. So I know civil ceremonies are done there, but they must have secured a room in there. Now, there's symbolism in moving into that space. One, it's owned by the council. What is an MP doing moving into a space owned by the council, if nothing other than to demonstrate how powerful he is and how he still controls the council? Why else would he be moving into a civic space like that? It is a sign of strength to show, I control this town and I control the council and I'll go where I want. So that's the first thing. The second thing is actually a bit more sinister. The second thing is actually a bit more sinister. That area of North Chadderton has been sold to the cartels, with Jim McMahon clearly involved. It's been sold to an organisation called CSDA, and I've gone through it previously. But CSDA, the chief executive, is a convicted criminal, or was a convicted criminal. He died a couple of years ago, but it was a convicted criminal. 6 months before it was all sold, they sold the Carnegie Library, the old police station, and the baths. McMahon was seen, photographed, having dinner with these people afterwards. And Mr. Mohibur Rahman, who owns CSDA, was seen out campaigning with McMahon, actively campaigning with McMahon prior to these sales. The basing of McMahon in Chadderton Town Hall is a sign of strength by the OBA cartel, who have now expanded their reach into North Chadderton. It is an open sign of strength. Here is our MP. And for McMahon, he now needs, because his boys are in trouble in Coldust, he now needs to go and base himself in the community, because until this point, do you know where he was basing himself? He was basing himself out of the mosques. But we've exposed his relationship with the mosques. We've shown how corrupt that is, so he can't go and base himself out of the mosques anymore. So he's moved into Chadderton, or he's moving into Chadderton Town Hall. It shows he owns the council, and it also shows his relationship with the cartels. The Carnegie Library, made into an Islamic school. I think it's now a mosque of some form, but it's an Islamic school. That's the Carnegie Library in Chadderton. The former police station, currently back on sale. Sean Fielding won't release how much they sold it to CSDA for. It's back on sale for over £500,000. So I'd like to see, wouldn't we like to see public assets? Wouldn't we like to see how much the council sold it for? And the old baths, that was supposed to be some form of training centre. On record, some form of catering training centre. It's an Asian wedding venue. Pumped with cash for its fit out. Yeah. What my eyes are saying and what you're thinking? Yeah. Maybe they'll fit an ice cream parlour in between there and before we finish with this. Speaking of ice cream parlours, not only ordinarily in a town with a free independent press, the headline news surely would be that Jim McMahon's parliamentary assistant and current deputy leader of Oldham Council, the COVID queen AROOJ SHAH, soon to become leader of Oldham Council if she has her way. Her convicted money laundering brother and several of his associates, so it's not just him, are on the run from the police in Pakistan. Fled the country. Because that AROOJ SHAH thing, that criminal WhatsApp group that the police in France and Belgium hacked, yeah, on the run in Pakistan. A whole host of glodic gangsters like the idiot whose threatening post I put up. Someone's going to get hurt, kid. Listen, gangster boys. Stay out of the politics of my town. Go and peddle your drugs wherever you want in Glodick, but don't try and take over schools. Don't try and park your cars outside school gates to pick up children, to groom them, to gang rape them and then pimping out to your Pakistani uncles. No, I object to that. And then put your cousins or your brothers up to be councillors. This town is rotten. And it's been allowed to become this way because the checks and balances have all failed. The press, which should be running with this story or running with the story of Jim McMahon using the funeral of Lee Rigby and a whole host of other stories, hasn't, because they're in the pockets of corrupt politicians. Dr. Carolyn Wilkins, Helen Lockwood, Boobgate Sutcliffe, all over promoted. No, that they owed their jobs to a bunch of corrupt politicians. And these corrupt politicians are in bed with gangsters in the community who supply them with a block vote. And somewhere in all of this is the gatekeeper, Detective Inspector Kenny Blaine, the cover-up merchant. And if you follow the breadcrumbs, they'll go past Sean Fielding, they'll go past Jim McMahon and Debbie Abrahams, and go all the way to Church House or whatever it's called on Deansgate, where Andy Burnham has his office. That's right, Ian. £525,000 is what it's up for sale for, isn't it? The old police station. So do the people of Oldham not have a right to know how much it was sold for? To CSDA, run by Mohiba Rahman, a dining partner, as fellow samosa nibbler of Jim McMahon. Do the people not have a right to know? You'll have to tell me, Gary. I don't know what you were told by Azad and Shamut. I didn't come out to see. I just saw the photographs and I smiled. I shared with everyone. I know Azad since I was small. I know Shamut. Shamut is a friend of mine, and clearly, the far right racist Debbie Barrett Cole is so far right, so racist, so much of a neo-Nazi. But when she stood to be a parliamentary candidate, her agent was actually Shamut, a Bangladeshi Muslim guy from Coldust, who used to sneak out the mosque with me. Go on, Gary, we're waiting. What were you told now? I'll put it up, lad. Whilst we're waiting for Gary to maybe put it up or not put it up. Last week I shared with you that I suspected the letter that you all received, the blatant act of electioneering involving Sean Fielding and the monitoring officer. So she has specific responsibilities, does Dr. Carolyn Wilkins, to make sure elections are run fit and proper. Her legal duties that she's held accountable for. Well, they both put their names and photographs to a letter promoting Sean Fielding just before he's up for election. And I shared with you, I suspected by my own rough calculations, it was somewhere between £50,000 and £100,000 it cost you all. Somewhere between £50,000 and £100,000. Well, it seems it's cost at least £70,000. It beggars belief, doesn't it? £70,000. These people spent £70,000, at least £70,000, in sending this out. After increasing council tax by 3% and by cutting valuable services. And you binned a letter, Sue. Sorry, things have passed me by, so I've not been able to comment the way I would normally do. And you've just reminded me. The local press, Fielding and all the others, would have... they've gone on about how they're making these bins bigger, yeah? They're making the bins bigger that you get in your houses, and they're making the bins bigger that are out in the streets. Buried in the small print is one thing, and then what I am getting to, I think, is the second thing. But you might as well all know where this is going. One, by making the outdoor bins bigger, it means there'll be fewer of them outside. So they're getting rid of bins. And we've all seen what happens in this town. If there isn't a bin nearby, unfortunately, people don't put the rubbish in their pockets. They drop it on the floor. So you're having bigger bins in fewer locations. How's that going to work? And the bigger bins you're getting in your houses, you do realise what that means, don't you? Whatever your bin collections are now, there'll be even less moving forward. And all the time, Lockwood is getting a pay rise, Boobgate is getting a pay rise, Wilkins earns the best part of £250,000 a year for working, what, 1 day a week here? The communications team is protected, and Fielding hired 2 new ladies for over £100,000. Yes, Mark, exactly that. We all sneaked out of the mosques, and we had an imam at the mosque who was a decent guy, who I think remembered how he was a child himself. So he never said anything back to our parents, but we all sneaked out of the mosque. Admittedly, I did it every night, but we all sneaked out of the mosque. Do you see? Do you see? So Jim McMahon has been telling people that a decorated soldier has shot Muslims, and so he shouldn't become a councillor and he's not going to support him. So he's using the fact, these people are using the fact that a child of this town went and served his country faithfully, selflessly, and returned home, is now being attacked by a serving UK MP for tours of duty in Northern Ireland, tours of duty in Bosnia, and forget my geopolitics, excuse my geopolitics, but from what I remember in my time, Bosnia was where we protected Muslims. I'm sure that's what that was. Srebrenica, Bosnia, all of that was where we went and, NATO intervened. Afghanistan, Iraq. Are you blaming Gary for Iraq? Last time I looked, it was a Labour government, Tony Blair, who took us to war on false pretenses. I've got that right, what haven't I? It was a Labour government. So if anyone's to blame for killing Muslims, blame the Labour Party, because they're the ones who took us to war in bloody Iraq. An MP is attacking a veteran and whipping up Muslims to not vote for him by saying he shot Muslims. Yeah, my mouth's open because I'm a... He really should be sacked. He should be suspended and he should be sacked. He should be marched out of this town with all of his jihadi and cartel mates with him. McMahon's block vote comes from Westwood and Caldas. It comes from the Pakistanis in Wearmouth, and it comes from the mainly Pakistanis and a smaller Bangladeshi community in Coppice, Medlock Vale. And if you study the demographics of the town, the ethnic minority communities are growing, so the Pakistani and Bangladeshi communities are growing, and their age profile means more and more of them vote every year in terms of eligible to vote, and they're also more politically active. He has 10,000 votes before election day starts. And that's delivered to him by the mosques and by the crooked politicians who he supports, and they pay patronage. I'm sorry, I'm still there. I'm with Anne. And serving MP of this town is claiming that a decorated soldier who is standing for election to serve his town on his return home is smearing him, and he's doing worse than smearing. He's putting a target on his head, no different than a target he had when he was in Afghanistan or Iraq, by saying this man killed Muslims. Sorry about I've stopped swearing on here because one Marilyn told me off once for swearing, and she sent me a message saying you're better than that, so I took that on. But I missed a call off him on Saturday night. Last night, Debbie, I was exhausted. I'm honest. I've not been sleeping well at all, as I'm sure you can all imagine. And he called about 7:30. It was Saturday night, and I was already dozing and fast asleep. And then I woke up at 2 a.m. and 4 a.m, and I heard a bang outside. So I was then up. So I missed somebody's call. Gary, just let me know when you're next in Caldas. I'll come out with you, mate. I was hoping somebody would have called me on Saturday, but these guys are actually worried about me. I spoke to his youngest brother on Saturday morning or Friday morning. Friday morning. I spoke to his youngest brother because I promised I'd help them with leaflets. And they're worried because they think if I'm out and about with them, something will happen and they'll have to intervene. And it wouldn't be the first time. I've already been saved from one beating by Moyab and his friend and the lads I grew up playing football with. And that was from the mosque. It was from Oldham Central Mosque. It was the goon squad from Oldham Central Mosque. The man is... Listen, McMahon openly engages with the getaway driver of an Oldham cop killer. He provided him with a reference on parliamentary letter-headed paper, didn't you, McMahon? He used the funeral of Lee Rigby to hide news of grooming gangs from parents, didn't you, McMahon? He oversaw and was involved in the sale or transfer of a number of assets belonging to the townsfolk to dodgy Asian businessmen, gangsters, goons, cartels. He goes out campaigning exclusively with men and happily disempowering women in our country. And now he's inciting violence against the grandson of a former Labour Party mayor who is out campaigning in Coldhurst, where his grandfather was the mayor and a representative of the town. And because he is a decorated former soldier who valiantly, selflessly served this country and went wherever they told him to go. Somalia, I think he did a stint as well. Didn't you, Gary? And McMahon is telling them this man killed Muslims. A UK MP is doing that. Tony, I've seen you critical of Azad and I've agreed with you. And then I went and asked him. Because I grew up with him, so I went and asked him. He calls me nephew. He was in tears. They exploited him. They made him hire illegal immigrants, but were related to them. They robbed him of his money. They used him and used him and used him. And when they'd finished with him, they threw him out. Everything that is wrong with this town, Paul, is a consequence of McMahon and people like McMahon. They have divided us. They have had us turn on each other. They have exploited us. They have exploited traditional working class loyalties. This is a man who, what was it? Did he not put a single, an expense claim in for a single item of 30 pence? That means he went to the trouble of filling in all the forms necessary so he could claim back 30 pence. As part of the £250,000 or whatever his expenses were for that year. He went to all the trouble to claim back 30 pence. He also claimed for a TV licence. I'd love to see what would happen with McMahon if we dumped him in Bosnia, or dumped him in Somalia, or dumped him in Iraq or Afghanistan. Of course, you were told this guy. I trust these guys. They wouldn't be making something like that up. And let's face it, the man's got form. It's a matter of public record. Those emails are a matter of public record. I think they were going to sue me for and have me in prison for. At the end of the day, we are where we are with them. They're true. His involvement with Irish Jimmy, the getaway driver of an Oldham cop killer. The lad who was out, who had his photograph took with his team who were out campaigning for an election. his open support of AROOJ SHAH, who is his parliamentary assistant, whose brother is a convicted money launderer, who herself has serious allegations and concerns and questions or left unanswered around the yo-yo ownership of Gelato's Ice Lounge. Both McMahon and AROOJ SHAH and Dr. Carolyn Wilkins and the Borough Solicitor Paul Entwistle, their involvement in the unlawful illegal sale of Glodic baths days before the election, if there was a clear example in this country, that is it, of a council attempting to rig an election. McMahon's open endorsement and support of Neil Wilby, who has been encouraging my murder by falsely claiming that I'm a police informant, followed by Sean Fielding and even his girlfriend, as well as a couple more dodgy politicians in this town, including Barrelgate Bashforth and Jenny Harrison, getting involved. They can try, Mark. I think by now people know whether or not I'm a coward. McMahon is worried because if Coldhurst falls, his cartel will have suffered a type of defeat that will resonate not just in this town, but in cartel-controlled Labour towns and cities across the country. If Coldhurst falls, it will show the people who live in those communities that the tyrants can be defeated and we can reclaim our communities, our neighbourhoods, and indeed our town, and we can build a better town together. Which is what the far-right racist Debbie Barrett Cole's Facebook group is called, is it not, Debbie? Oldham Together? What sort of Nazi group name is that? Oldham Together. I find it predictable, I'm afraid, Gary, as I'm digesting what has happened, that this would be done to you in the way it has. After all, this is a man who sits in mosques, nibbles samosas, and attends parties that provide him with a vote, block vote, who, when leaving those mosques, then goes to the Labour Party headquarters and chairs the group that bans any criticism of Israel. That's a skill, Gary. To be able to play both sides like that is a skill. He wants to be your Prime Minister. You do know that, don't you? He has a group behind him who want to portray him as this great working class hero who comes from a northern working class town. And they're trying to push him to be the next Labour Party leader. It doesn't matter the trail of devastation he left behind in the town whilst he was a politician here and in the council. Of course there is never any women there, Karen. Of course there isn't. They're in the kitchens cooking the samosas and whipping up the mint sauce. And handing over their votes, their postal votes, so the men can put the cross where it needs to go. And hand it over to Jim. Or whoever's with him at the time. And there is, Mark, it's a skill. That level of hypocrisy and double standards is a skill. I've got to applaud him. It's a skill. It's like standing for the protection of children from grooming and gang rape. And then having someone like Shabir Ahmed working for the council and hiding it. Debbie Barrett Cole. I am on record. I'll look into the camera as I say this again. Debbie Abrams, the MP for Oldham East and Saddleworth, doctored evidence in attempt to have me falsely arrested. After I dared challenge her silence, particularly in relation to her screaming and shouting for her constituents in Kashmir. Her silence on the grooming, gang rape and trafficking of children from Count Hill School by Pakistani paedophiles. Count Hill School was the secondary school in her constituency. And the Pakistani paedophiles were from Glodick, again, an area in her constituency. Oh, and by the way, the reason why she survived as MP, after losing in 7 of the 9 wards, was the block vote delivered to her by the Pakistanis in Glodick. Coincidence? Or a paedophile protector? It's a free country still, isn't it? I can ask that question. Talking of paedophiles and protecting paedophiles, and note Paul Jarvis, he's not here today, but I note Paul Jarvis managed to draw out Sean Fielding into an exchange regarding the cover-up of child abuse at Failsworth Secondary School, where Sean Fielding, along with a number of prominent Labour Party politicians, were governors. In typical Sean Fielding style, he goes around the houses and attempts to deflect a very simple question. Sean Fielding, are you aware of the cover-up of child sex abuse at Failsworth School involving teachers? Are you aware of any cover-up? Say yes or a no. Are you aware of any allegations made by children or their families? Yes or a no? We've seen it on this transmission over several weeks when I first started sharing this, how parents impulsively themselves shared that they knew this had gone on and their children had told them. And they added more information. Fielding won't answer. Now, we all know why Fielding won't answer. He's been caught being a barefaced liar and involved in covering up child sex exploitation already with his refusal to implement an independent investigation and call in the government. Now perhaps we know why. Now perhaps we know why. As well as the evidence taking us to a bunch of Pakistani paedophiles who are left free to groom and gang rape our children. At the same time, the council was covering it up in our schools. And this time the groomers and rapists weren't Pakistanis. They were male white teachers. Katie, you're right. Because any school that fails to acknowledge what has taken place, and bear in mind, this is now a national issue, with the Department for Investigation launching a special inquiry across the country. But it's worse here, because the government's inquiry is, it's this culture, and this culture involves boys. Well, unfortunately, if this culture involves boys, boys have picked up this behaviour from men around them. And at Failsworth School, it was the male teachers who were instructing girls to stay behind in classes afterwards. Kids were petrified. They all knew what was going on. Kids were petrified. As they were systematically abused year after year after year. And when these students or a brave teacher or support staff or a parent reported it, the children were punished. I've reported it to the DFE. I shared a form with Debbie and asked Debbie to share it. And I saw some of the comments. Oh, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to... No, you don't need to do any other things. The reason this town is in this mess is because some people actually want to come up with 100 reasons why you can't do something. Even if you suspect child abuse, you're duty bound to report it. That's what they taught us. Even if you suspect it. I know it happened there. You know it happened there. Many of you listening on with me know it happened there. And what was Fielding? Report it to the MASH team. The MASH team is bent. Why would you report it to the council team? And I went to the MASH team. I went to the local authority designated officer regarding the chairman of Oldham Central Mosque. And she tried to cover it up and then got back in touch eventually with the parent and said, we're not interested in this. When this convicted sex offender had in public documentation described himself as a teacher. The mosque didn't conduct any DBS checks. There was no safeguarding training. How many paedophiles accessed children in the mosque I went to? That's the multi-agency safeguarding hub for you in Oldham. It's not fit for purpose. And Fielding wants you to go and report a school involved in the cover-up of child abuse to the very council team that helped cover it up. Fielding is duty bound to report it because that's how the rules work. He is duty bound to report it. If you suspect it, you have to report it. It's not for him to tell you or me or someone else to go and report it, but he won't report it because one of the guys is his mate. It's a well-known fact in Failsworth. One of the guys involved is Fielding's mate. They played in that band together, blowing trumpets. Is that the woman I had an exchange with earlier, Mark? I don't know who she is. They think they're smart. They're not smart. I'm not saying I'm smart at all, but I'm definitely not stupid. So they think they're smart and they think we're stupid. And if they don't get their way, they can shout down at us and call us racist. That's the go-to tactic of oppressing people like me and people like you in this town, isn't it? Know your place, shut your mouth, or else. I asked a former politician friend of mine, I asked Jackie Stanton this question. I asked Moib, because Jackie and Moib are friends, about this. And the reason they manage to live with themselves is because they think this is normal. Because this is what they've inherited. If you look at people like Fielding, if you look at people like Sahid Mushtaq, AROOJ Shah, they've become politicians in a climate where this is the norm. They're just repeating what was done before. They've been mentored by these people. And can you imagine if this continues what the next lot will be? They'll be even worse. The culture in Count Hill School of Asian young men, paedophiles, groomers, being able to pick up white working class girls from the school gate could only have happened in an environment where girls were already exploited. Now, none of what I'm saying is controversial anymore because it's now national news and the Department for Education are agreeing with it because the victims were middle-class girls. So now that finally victims include middle-class girls or girls in the leafy suburbs, now it becomes newsworthy. Before then, working-class girls are just white trash. It's why we need our own people in charge of our town. We need people who will fight for us. We need people who will defend us. We need people who will amplify our voices. We need people like Brian Hoban. To date, the only politician who's openly engaged with me on this platform. And the consequences of him engaging with me? He was ostracized, he was demonized, and he was attacked by both politicians and council officers. And when he engaged with me, do you know what he engaged with me about? And I'll put the transmission back on, I think, this week. I'd exposed Rod Blythe as a convicted sex offender, whilst the Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, politicians and the council officers had all covered it up. I don't know her, Mark. I just had a couple of exchanges with her because I picked up where she, I'm not. I learnt this lesson from the schools. I'm not going to remain silent when people attack me for the greater good or any of that. I'm going to defend myself. I'm going to keep defending myself. No, Saeed Mushtaq wouldn't have been a taxi driver. Saeed Mushtaq is one of the three brothers Mushtaq. He is a senior counsellor in Oldham. He also failed to declare his interest in a business owned by his brother, where he's a business partner of his brother, that the council sold a very, very tasty plot of land to. No, don't be silly. The council aren't going to tell you how much they sold that land for. Or why young Mr. Mushtaq didn't declare his interest. Shahid Mushtaq is also the guy who got up and called Debbie Barrett Cole a racist when she'd never said anything racist at all. She'd not even brought up a race. She had gone to the town hall to ask a question. She'd been invited to go there to ask a question. And Shahid Mushtaq stood up and called her a racist. We've also got a brother called Tahir Mushtaq who masquerades as a solicitor. But as I found out when I wrote to the Solicitors Regulatory Authority complaining about this imbecile, he wasn't a solicitor at all. So he did what Sean Fielding has done and what Jim McMahon has done. He claimed that somehow I was involved in abusing minors. And by now, people have worked out for themselves that the more ridiculous their assertions towards me get, the more clear it is I'm not a criminal of any form whatsoever. I'm coming up to 30 years of serving my country with a flawless record. And this thing we're talking about safeguarding community, safeguarding children raised, protecting from extremists and terrorists, it's what I do. It's what I've done for longer than most of these idiots have been alive. No. They've been dividing us for too long. They've been exploiting us for too long. And they've been selling our children for too long. Your wife does make very good samosas, though, Maya. So if there were any samosas on the go, I'll come along. I could be a samosa nibbling mate. I'll walk in the background behind the pair of you whilst you're knocking on doors. I'll be eating samosas. Greater Manchester Police are not fit for purpose, Paul. I think that much is very clear now. A police force mired in special measures, where the most senior police officer has been forced to resign, where the mayor in charge faces allegations of corruption from the very police officers beneath him, and where the likes of Detective Inspector Kenny Blaine can brazenly and openly cover up crime and write to victims and say, I'm the gatekeeper. I decide. I'm the gatekeeper. Katie, I love a samosa. And Moyab's wife does make really good samosas. I don't think there's any doubt of that anymore, do you, Mark? Burnham is indeed bent. When senior police officers come out and say, I'm calling you a liar, I'm calling you corrupt, and here is a dossier of evidence that proves you're a liar and proves you're corrupt. But it doesn't make the Manchester Evening News because Jennifer Williams, the so-called investigative lead, is one of Burnham's ladies. You hang out with him, don't you, Jennifer Williams? You're one of that metropolitan elite that wants to see Andy Burnham and Keir Starmer, and hopefully you think you'll go and get yourself a senior job in number 10 as some sort of policy advisor or something when these people are in power. Isn't that right, Jen? You lie on behalf of these people and you help cover up what they've done. Why else is it not in the local newspaper that a senior police officer is calling the mayor bent and corrupt with a dossier of evidence? Why is it not in the local newspaper that Jim McMahon used the funeral of Lee Rigby to hide news of grooming gangs? Why is it not in the local newspaper that Dr. Carolyn Wilkins and the borough solicitor Paul Entwistle were involved in an attempt to rig a local election? Why is it not in the newspaper that AROOJ Shah's money laundering brother is on the run in Pakistan? And she's somehow involved in passing on to him the ice cream parlour that she'd failed to declare she owned and then claimed she made no money from and claimed that, I can't even keep up with all of her backdated nonsense. Why is it not in the news of the cover-up of child abuse at Failsworth School? Why is it not in the news that children were groomed and then gang raped from the gates of Counthill School? Why is it not in the news? Do you see? Sorry, I've just dropped my pencil. Again, please, Moab tells me off, so I need to keep doing this. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Over 500 of you watched it live. I've got 300 supporters, and I reckon 100 of them are my mates. As in my, real life mates that I badger all the time for food and sustenance. Please click the subscription button. Click the like button. If you're liking the videos, only 30 of you liked the last video. And I know just by the comments, there was something like 400 comments. So if 400 of you are engaging, more than 30 of you can click that like button. Maybe Neil will be. Hi, Neil. Click the dislike button. That's if you can work out how to use a mouse, Neil. Same to that guy. What's he called? The dimwit from Didsbury. Ewan. I'm off Twitter. I'm on Twitter. I'm off Twitter. I'm scared. I'm on Twitter. I don't think Ewan would ever enjoy me visiting him in Didsbury. But I welcome you into Oldham. But you fake liberals like you who have no understanding of the lived reality of failed multiculturalism in towns like mine. I welcome you to come into a town like mine and see for yourself how it's nothing at all like Didsbury. Come and see for yourself what is taking place in this town. Of how the poor white communities have been demonised and exploited. And the Bangladeshi and Pakistani communities live in fear of the cartels. the gatekeeper will probably think, how can this promote my career? How can I climb that greasy pole? I met him in Upall. When I went to see him, I left laughing to myself. He claimed to know nothing about the sale of Glodic baths, but leaked that the sale had been agreed before the elections. If the sale had been agreed before the elections, then there was no need to sell a building that was derelict 2 weeks before the election, was there? If the sale had already been agreed and the building was derelict, what difference would 2 weeks have made? That's the problem with these people. Once you break it down into something very simple, there's no wriggle room left. It was a bribe. It was undervalued and sold to declared associates of AROOJ SHAH who was standing for re-election, the Ghazali Trust, who had announced how powerful and influential they were in the community 2 weeks before the election so that they could go out and campaign on behalf of AROOJ SHAH to gather votes for her. I think it's very clear to anyone who looks at it objectively that they can come to no other conclusion than that. That should be in the newspaper. The local democracy reporter Charlotte Green, who I know watches these transmissions, should be reporting that. The council-funded press. Is it Nick Jackson in the Oldham Times? Whoever in the Oldham Chronicle? Is it News at Ken? Is he called Ken Bennett? Who I had word with 2 years ago after he thought he was being clever and then lied about me. He should be reporting about it, but he won't. The COVID Queen is manoeuvring behind the scenes to galvanise enough support so she can become the next leader of Oldham Council. That's what she's doing, Sue. Have a look around and you'll see that very few Labour politicians are going anywhere near Sean Fielding at the moment. I'm hearing he's struggling to get others to go out campaigning with him. And the ones who are have just been exposed for their own dubious links to far-right organisations. That's right, isn't it, Paul Boots? I can see you posted earlier. Will you post that again? Is that right? Did I read that right? Someone from within Failsworth has come forward with information about one of the other Labour Party councillors and his associations with the far right. I actually spend very little time on Twitter, and I put the odd post on when I want political awareness, because the political classes clearly use Twitter and they look down on us on people who use Facebook and YouTube. But I have no aspirations of being a politician, really, or being legitimised in the eyes of politicians. So as far as I'm concerned, my interest is my town and the people of my town and the ordinary people of my town. That's it, Mark. I knew there was it, Andrew. Thank you, both of you. BMPP. Thanks, Paul. What did he do? What was it? What are the allegations? Something about driving Nick Griffin around or handing out BNP leaflets or National Front leaflets. Sorry, I've had one of those weeks where I've done very little on social media apart from glance at stuff today and yesterday, and I'm like thinking, hey, what have I missed? But these are the guys who are drinking partners of Martin Judd, the Labour Party councillor for Hollingwood that they've all kept quiet about, who it's now emerged is facing trial for child sex offences. I just find that I can't say it's true there because I don't know him. I'm only going off what people have said. All I'll say is, for an allegation like that, it needs to be investigated. Oh, Paul, I was wondering where you were, mate. I was mentioning how you had had an exchange with Sean Fielding as well. And he wriggled out of answering a simple question. Is he aware of children being abused at a school where he was a governor? I know it's all allegedly, Katie. But in this town, what we found out is the allegedly is often very, very true. Take, for instance, Barrelgate Stephen Bashforth, the Royton councillor, who admitted to taking a barrel of beer, carrying a barrel of beer out under his arm from a restaurant, and then claimed it was on sale or return. So he admitted to being a bootlegger. Never mind taking a bribe. And of course, Jim McMahon and him are mates. Why does that not surprise anyone? Okay. If there's any questions for me, I'm happy to answer some questions before I log off. I'll try and get back to normal next week and have all the bits of evidence and stuff. But please subscribe to the channel. I know most of you have, some of you haven't. And those who haven't, please, if you can, buy me a coffee. Those who haven't, those who have, please don't. But those who haven't, please click on that link, buymeacoffee.com/Recusant9 and just buy me a coffee. It's £2. It helps keep me going. But if you have questions, bring them up, and let me put the comments on screen as well. Let me try and get this right. There you go. You've not been banned from what, Paul? I had a comedy a moment this morning. Moab sent me a message through from the Jasori Road guys, and I'd done all the spiel for them. Like, you all know I do the writing and for a lot of my friends and a lot of stuff. So I'd done all the spiel for them on the background to Jessary Road, and I was introduced as the owner. So I phoned him up after he sent me. I said, seeing as I'm the owner of this place, does that mean I get free food brought to my house every evening? And the phone went dead. So that was the exchange of that. But the food was lovely. They brought me the food round on Friday, I think, and no, it was lovely. I'm done. I think I'm done for the evening. I'm thinking, if there's questions, I'll answer the questions, but I'm not seeing. Is there anything coming up? I think, oh, Kia Starmer. Yes. He got back in touch. So, I told Kia Starmer what Matt Martin was up to in terms of his relationship with Neil Wilby and the providing a platform for a man who claimed I'm a police informant. And as the former chief prosecutor of the CPS, he should know exactly what this meant. And he replied. And tried, so we take all of this seriously, but please fill in this complaints form if you want to take it forward. And I replied to him and said, I'm not interested. I am not at all interested, Sir Keir, in filling in a form and having it lost in the system. As far as I'm concerned, you now know what your mate Jim McMahon has been up to. This is a man who openly endorses the getaway driver of an Oldham cop killer. This is a man who openly encourages a disgraced journalist that a High Court judge described as a malicious blogger in amplifying his dangerous, malicious allegations that I am a police informant, which has placed my life and the lives of my family at risk. You now know, Keir Starmer. Apparently, it's been referred to it the chief whip in the Labour Party. Don't expect anything to happen. These guys have covered up anyone and everyone in the Labour Party who's ever been involved in anything dodgy. The only way we get rid of McMahon is by destroying the cartels, because the cartels give him the block vote. And for as long as he has the block vote, he controls the town. That's what I've said to you all along. He who controls the block Asian vote controls the town. Okay, I'm done. Hopefully I see you all next week. Who knows, maybe the police will be in touch about the bent officer, DCI Kenny Blaine. Maybe the police will be in touch about Rusty Wheels and how it is that I can have my front door posted on the internet and no one from Greater Manchester Police are interested. But when Sean Fielding's 27-year-old girlfriend feels threatened by a disabled grandmother, there's practically a SWAT team outside. This town is broken. And it's broken because it's led by the corrupt, whose purpose is to serve the corrupt. Next week. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and if you can, buy me a coffee. Good night.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.